Tonight's episode is brought to you by DARPA. So politics has always been a very confusing thing for me to talk about with other people. And I do feel like some kind of transparency in the type of politics that I have is necessary. But unfortunately, this is going to take a while to explain. There are a few buzzwords I could use to help describe what my views are. Easiest way to condense my views would be like, I'm on the left. I would say I pretty much agree with every single leftist belief. So let's break it down, right? To be a little bit more narrow, saying I am a democratic, libertarian, socialist would be a good start. I do believe that in an ideal society, we would have something of that nature. Democratic socialism is kind of possible, and even in this country, given everything that's happened, in some sense, there is a chance, right? So I'm not gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater. Libertarian, democratic, socialist, that's kind of the general vibe. I want the government to stay out of our lives as much as possible while providing a socialist framework, and also we run it. There isn't just a clear separation between the state and the people. And this includes eradication of capitalism, of course, lobbyists, the monetary fund, monetarism in general, the idea of there are some who can own a bunch of land. And no, we need to get rid of that. I would say that I'm somewhat of an anarcho-Marxist, Leninist, Maoist. And I'm also blue no matter who, and I'm also woke. And I know a lot of these things are pretty conflicting, and a lot of people would think that's not possible. I'm not sure if it's possible either, but these are my beliefs. I'm also a bit of a militarist, although it comes from the realist perspective that the strongest military is necessary for a nation in order for us to actualize our own goals. We need to have the strongest military. It's not a matter of principle or morality here. It's a matter of, if I want a society that is Marxist and anarchist or libertarian or Maoist or whatever, we need the most powerful military. We need the most powerful defensive structure in some way so that we are not at odds with other nations. Other nations will do what they can to take control of very powerful entities, and that includes the United States. I'm a person who lives in the United States. If I want my country to become a democratic, libertarian, socialist utopia, we need to have a powerful enough military to protect our freedom. It's weird how that all comes to be, but hear me out. I don't even know where to begin, to be honest. Anarcho-Maoist, Marxist, Leninist, all of these things make sense. Marxist-Leninism is a bit outdated. It doesn't really apply to the current conditions. Maoism definitely doesn't apply to the current conditions. However, there is definitely a need for the people to eradicate this feudal society that we are forming via corporatocracy. Now, there are some things that you should know. There isn't a specific personnel that I can point to, but there is a desire from the corporations and from the government to make it so that you can't even inherit the house that your parents gave you when they died, unless you're able to pay the taxes. So there are a lot of people out there who are working paycheck to paycheck, who don't really have much money saved up. And when their parents die and they get their house, which would give them a lot of freedom from having to deal with landlords, there's a possibility they'll just have that house taken away from them because they won't be able to come up with the money in time to pay the taxes on it. Now, I don't know exactly how far we are in the current system to getting to that point, but that is the goal. So this is going to make it so that the wealthiest people on the planet are going to own more land, more houses.
They also want to make homelessness illegal, where they're throwing homeless people into prisons just because they're homeless. As well, homeless people are forced to work, basically creating slave camps. One would call it a concentration camp, another would call it a gulag, but we all know what this is. So they're taking away our houses, they're throwing us into prisons, they're forcing us to work. They're going to solve the problem of how do we maintain this incredibly fucked up economy? How do we keep the rich up top without appeasing the working class? We just find ways to take everything we can from them and make them work forever. until they die. And then they can, breed within prisons, and by then they'll probably create new laws to put these children who are being birthed in prison. I don't even know how they're going to resolve that. I'm guessing just by allowing prison guards to rape the inmates. This is where we're headed, okay? I don't know how extreme it'll be and how quickly, but this is what they want. And they're already somewhat doing it. It's no longer some crazy conspiracy. Jeffrey Epstein is no longer some crazy conspiracy, right? The idea that a bunch of millionaires get together and start fucking certain types of individuals that we all thought was the most protected class ever. And that turned out to be true. So if it is true that they want to take away the houses from poor people who can't afford the taxes, if they want to throw homeless people into prison, and if they force people in prisons to work, where do you think this is all heading?
So it is without a doubt that we need a Maoist perspective among the civilians, because that is where we're heading. Now, I'm not saying that this means that every element of Maoist belief or Mao Zedong thought is necessarily going to apply here. That's why I just throw it on here with the Marxist-Leninism, Maoism, and anarchism. But anarchism is something that I do think, in the end of the day, is what we need to head towards. It's the goal of communism, it's the goal of liberalism, it's the goal of every enlightened way of thinking. We need to achieve a non-hierarchical structure where people can coexist in peace, voluntarily, no domination. But we are far from that, and I understand that. But I'm not going to just forget that is the goal here. I do not worship the state at all. And I do not worship the idea of owning property. There is a reality here when it comes to capitalism, or what we should really call corporatism. We're long past capitalism. Capitalism is not some ideal free market thing. I'm just talking about the way commodity is accumulated. It's no longer the same. The capitalists of today aren't really what Marx was describing. We live in a monetarist society that has led to this corporatism. Now, corporatism could exist in capitalism, monetarism, whatever, and I don't know how to label it all. But these are just realities that we are facing, and it is evolving faster and faster. When Palantir is utilized by the government to create an AI consume surveillance state, what do we call it? Is it capitalism? Is it corporatism? Is it fascism? Is it what? It's consumerism. I mean, it's mass consumerism, mass surveillance state shit. That's why even being able to come up with my own ideological labels is incredibly difficult. We need to do something. If it's elect every democratic socialist that runs for office, yeah, that's one of the strategies for sure. I do continue to vote, and that's why I guess I should say I'm blue no matter who. And the only reason why is because of the domestic policy. I don't think the Democrats are good for society, just how I don't think the Republicans are. It is slightly more likely that the Democrats will not infringe on trans rights, women's rights, minority rights, etc. It's a possibility that they will. Democrats do it all the time, but they do it less. Now, when it comes to foreign policy and economic policy, Democrats and Republicans, yes, they are almost the same thing. And sometimes they differ in some ways where even the Republicans are slightly better in one thing and the Democrats are slightly better in another thing. But the reality is they're the same. But when it comes to progressive issues, when it comes to human rights, the Democrats are slightly better. And it took a Trump presidency to really show me that. It's very unfortunate 50-year-old women being crammed into tiny little trucks by people wearing masks and holding assault weapons, and having to witness that, having to see videos of this shit, people just being tackled on the street who are just trying to work. Not dangerous people at all, workers. And, it's kind of funny because this isn't even good for capitalism. And they all know this. But it took a massive amount of terror on individuals, on just regular everyday people, to show me what the Republicans are capable of and what they're cheering for. This is what they want. They like seeing immigrants suffer. It's quite sickening. I hate the Democrats, and yet I will vote for them almost every time now. I understand. I've realized this is what I have to do whenever I go to the ballot, which is mostly absentee. All right, so it's not a big deal for me. My state won Democrat by 60%. The other guy was a self-avowed Nazi. Okay, he won 40% of the vote. So this is what we're dealing with when it comes to domestic policy. We have to worry about Nazis taking power. So I'm blue no matter who. And I'm woke because I realize at this point it's no longer cool to be into edgy humor. I like edgy humor and I still engage in it, but I'm no longer fighting for that right. That was before Trump, and then once Trump won, that whole thing became mainstream. Edgy humor is no longer cool. It's cringe. You have the least funny people who are doing the edgiest type of stuff, and they have the freedom to do it, and they think they're cool and counterculture, and it's not. It's not cool. It's not counterculture. It's the mainstream now. And on top of that, we have actual far-right people in office. So I'm woke. So whatever. I have an ironic tone whenever I speak with the people I know in person about it, but I always encourage it. I always reinforce it, because at the end of the day, to me, it is the right thing. It's to be woke. People always talk about the woke mind virus, the woke left, and it's just these fucking retarded, ridiculous ways of looking at the world. The woke left is what caused the No, to be honest, the woke element of the Democratic Party is the only reason why I'm voting for them. Because it's the only thing that actually makes them stand out, unless they start actually embracing socialism, which, who knows, that might actually happen. If Zohar Mamdani wins, then we're on the right track. And I think that's why they so badly don't want him to win. Because people respond well to it. The everyday people who are suffering economically because of how the richest people keep fucking buying more shit and leveraging it over the poor and using it to just suck more money out of you. Yeah, people are starting to embrace socialism because it's just like, I can't afford to live anymore. All the money I make goes to rent and healthcare. How could anyone embrace the system anymore? They tried to convince you, we live in a socialist country, right? They appealed to the dumbest people on the planet, saying, we live in a socialist country. Biden and Kamala are communists. That's what they were saying. The dumbest fucking possible thing you could hear. And they were saying that, and people believed it. It's just no longer working. Even Tucker Carlson is going to Talking Points USA or Turning Points USA and saying it isn't going to be solved by getting rid of immigrants. It's fucked up that the banks are making living harder. So, who knows? Maybe the right's going to become, socialist, but with a nationalist tint, which, historically hasn't been the best thing. We'll see where that goes. Why do I embrace Marxist-Leninism, all that? Because I realize, regardless of what happens, we're going to have to take over the state. We're going to have to take over the government. If we want to achieve something that will lead to a better society, we need massive radical change. Something that can't necessarily be done by the legal structure that currently exists. We can't collectivize all property. Not possible. Not under this government. So things will have to radically change. Maybe we can achieve it democratically. Anyways, that's the goal. That's the dream, right? That is truly the dream, that everyone can just decide democratically to radically change things. To a point where we're able to elect politicians that defy the donor class. That's possible. And please God, this episode is brought to you by MK Ultra. But the reality is we will need to use the state radically in a way that isn't necessarily going to be constitutional. What is the Constitution? What has it done for us lately? You get that freedom of speech. It comes in once in a while, but, people are being deported over speech now, so where is the freedom of speech? I don't know. We have the right to bear arms, and it seems that there is a very specific reason. I think the Founding Fathers intended for there to be uprisings way more often than they currently are, because they knew to some degree that the nature of government is to become more powerful, to appeal to the richest people. That's really what it is too. It's the richest people who run the government. Karl Marx actually appreciated the Founding Fathers and I think the Bill of Rights. There is something quite beautiful about the Bill of Rights that maybe after everything we can still hold on to something like that. The concept of due process, the concept of freedom of speech. These things that are, in my opinion, so important. They are rights that need to be protected in no matter what government we live in. But when it comes to property, when it comes to capital, when it comes to the profit incentive of the highest up people, we've reached a point where there is zero evidence in support of that anymore. If you want everyone to be prosperous, we need a total makeover. Here's the other reason why Marxist-Leninism makes sense, and realism, and materialism, and militarism. Because the only reason why we ever had prosperity in this country for the past few decades is because we sucked the fucking juice out of many other countries that were poorer than us. We found a way to exploit them to make our lives more consumer friendly. We're not going to lose food, we're not going to lose water, we're not going to lose healthcare if we freed the world of capitalist grip. But we may lose, a new iPod or a new iPhone every year. We're going to lose certain consumables. When rent is this expensive, when healthcare is so expensive, the consumables are no longer. Who gives a fuck, right? Who gives a fuck? It don't matter. I haven't bought a PS5. When it came out, I didn't give a fuck. You know why? Because I was thinking, I gotta buy stock. I gotta buy guns. I gotta save money for my rent and my healthcare. Consumables are mattering less and less. People are not gonna buy. And this hurts only certain types of rich people. But the rich people who are being hurt by the shitty economy, they can only pray for things to get better. They don't have it in them to push for a socialist economy because then they lose their rich status. They don't want that. So they're instead going to just pray to become one of the wealthy elites who will be insulated from all of the collapse of capitalism. That is the big goal here. When the inflation bubble bursts, when inflation finally destroys the dollar, the billionaires will have a bunch of land that they own so that they don't care. That's why they're consuming more land. That's why they're trying to buy as much as possible so that when the dollar no longer is valuable, they'll still be fine. They'll be insulated from the destruction that they caused. Global warming, they want to be insulated from it. We have to suffer through it, but they have billions of dollars. They will use it to protect themselves, to buy up things that will give them like a nice little fucking castle, that they can protect themselves from all the destruction of the world that they caused. So I hope that makes sense. Also, this episode is brought to you by One World Government. Adios.